Ba-bum, baby. Ba-bum, baby. Pour a cup, take a break, settle down and join us on a whim. Gentle thoughts, honest talks, it's time for a sip and stim.
Hi, I'm Toni.
Hi, I'm Kate.
And I'm Becca.
Welcome to Sip Stim, where parenting on the spectrum pairs best with caffeine, coping skills, and stims.
So today on the show, we have my younger sister, Becca. She's going to be sharing us her personal story about her little boys that are currently receiving services through early intervention. And we're going to get her feel and story and kind of just hear a little bit about what her experience has been and what she has to say about the whole process so far.
Awesome. So, yeah, I'm very excited to get to know you. I know Kate shared a little bit about your story, but I actually didn't know this piece. Are both of your children receiving early intervention services?
They are. My oldest just aged out of early intervention, the birth to 3-year program, and has moved on to the preschool program. And then my youngest is in the birth to 3-year program right now.
So when did you kind of get that mom instinct to, or, was there someone that brought it up that, hey, maybe we need to look at their development? When did you kind of notice something felt a little bit different?
With my oldest, around 9 months, at his 9-month appointment, just checking with the pediatrician. He wasn't babbling very much. Kind of that core strength was lacking. And when I kind of mentioned the babbling, she was like, yeah, I think we need to reach out to early intervention just to get an evaluation, see what they think. So I'm glad, as a first-time mom, I'd heard of early intervention, especially from, Caitlin's experience. But I didn't really know where to start. So that was nice having a pediatrician, not just, saying, well, let's wait and just see, if he catches up. And then with my youngest, obviously, since I'd been already through the process with my oldest, kind of knew the signs. I pushed it off a little bit longer than I should have, just because I felt like I've gone through this already. I should already have the skills to get him caught up. But probably around 11 months old, I made the call to early intervention. Already told his pediatrician I had taken care of it, since I'd already kind of gone through it already.
Yeah, I think the common experience that I hear from families when they have a firstborn, I find that they often get services later on because, like you said, you don't really know what to look for. So I think it's really great that you had a pediatrician that was not afraid to say, hey, let's just see what they have to say. Let's see if they can help your child. I think it was kind of maybe 10 years ago, that was kind of more of the approach, let's wait and see. Whereas now it feels like there's a shift. I'm not sure if you experienced that with Grayson or with Rosalind. I don't even know if Rosalind actually had early intervention.
Yeah, she did. Both kids did. Rosalind was more of a wait and see kind of deal. She was a little bit slower to start speaking. And of course, Grayson he doesn't speak. But she was definitely more of the, she was kind of delayed. She would mix up her words a lot. She would say, she would call a cat Bob. And then eventually that turned into pumpkin. So the cat turned into, it would be umpkin. So it's just little random things like that. And she qualified for speech first, and then she didn't need any PT, but she did qualify for OT. So she had speech and OT through EI.
So I know that you were sharing that you're very close with your family, Kate. So I'm guessing that you probably were in the know with your nephews. Were you was Kate kind of part of the push for you to take that step to do early intervention or to kind of investigate more with evaluations?
I'm trying to remember back. Sometimes all of that kind of seems like a blur, especially that first year of motherhood. I definitely, once the pediatrician had recommended, I definitely remember talking to you about it and just the positive experience that you had with it, which made me feel better about, approaching that, because it can be a little daunting, especially as a first-time parent, not really knowing what it all means, and is this going to be a forever thing? Is it just temporary? So it's nice having people who have already had that experience and can kind of guide you along the way.
Yeah, for sure. Did anyone in your life kind of dismiss your concerns or kind of, oh, they're fine?
Not really. I think if people did, it was more so to make me feel better about it, and not that it was anything that I was doing wrong or, wasn't working on them with. I think older generations maybe a little bit, just because I don't think early intervention was maybe super popular, especially like when I was an infant. So I wouldn't say it was dismissive as like I didn't know what I was talking about or anything, but more so just to make me feel better about the situation.
I was dismissed when I got the initial evaluation done for Roslyn. Our mother, we used to call her Dr. Lynn because we said she acted like she knew everything, and to an extent she did know a lot. I will give her that, but she often said that Roslyn was totally fine. There was nothing wrong with her, and that I was just wasting my time calling early intervention. But it did prove otherwise, and it was necessary. She did start speaking a couple months after she started the service, and it did really prove that it was really needed.
Well, and I think that maybe tapping into that older generation kind of mindset. I mean, my husband's best friend said he didn't speak until he was like 4. So, early intervention, maybe it was around, I'm not sure, the whole back history on it. But I think in the more recent years, and especially as more information's coming out with autism and everything like that, people are becoming more aware of it, and those services are there for you to receive.
Yeah, I think that's a common, not super common, but I've definitely heard of a lot of people that are in the older generation. I didn't speak until I was 3 or I was 5. And thinking about that now, like I have little ones. My oldest is 7, almost 8. And then I have my kids are not far from those ages. I'm thinking, wow, if that were to be my children, I would have surely had my red flag go off. Hey, we need to look into this. But maybe the mindset was just a lot different back then. And I can recall, actually, in defense of your mother, one of my very close friends, her son, he was born maybe a month before my daughter, my oldest, and she started noticing signs. And I think my first gut instinct, even though I'm in the field, was he's so young. And honestly, even from the time that I became a BCBA to now, which was it 8 years ago that I became a BCBA, but I've been in the field for a lot longer. Back then, like even 8 years ago, 9 years ago, 10 years ago, kids weren't diagnosed at 2. They weren't diagnosed at 1. They weren't receiving intervention that young very often. It was more rare. So I think I even had to personally go through that shift. And I think as a friend who's like family, I think I also had a similar approach in that moment where I was like, he's so young, give him time. And I think back to that moment, I'm like, I wish I didn't say that, because I think she needed to hear her concerns validated. But my intentions were good. So right. I can say I'm guilty of that as well, even being someone that's a big advocate for early intervention.
Yeah, but also at the end of the day, how are you supposed to know?
Right. Right.
You're trying to be supportive, but also you're trying to not give too much of a professional side of it because you you don't want to bridge that gap with a friend or even like a family member with, getting
Right.
professional and kind of mixing that water. So, yeah, I mean, I get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it really boils down to trusting your maternal and parental instincts. I face that kind of situation with my kids in different aspects of our lives regularly, where it's like, no, I hear your input, but no, this is what's right for my kids. And it's, um, I think parents should doubt themselves a lot less. And it's okay if you're
Mhm.
wrong. It's okay if you're like so worried and, oh my goodness, they're not, where they should be. And then you go and get them evaluated and they say, no, they're doing good. They're okay. Or they're
Hmm.
slightly behind. Versus like putting it off. I think that's more hazardous in my opinion.
Yeah. No, yeah, totally, totally agree. And what's the worst that could happen? They tell you that they would advise you to go and get another, you know, evaluation elsewhere or to go and see a medical doctor or something. I mean, that doesn't mean it's a definite. That's not the end of the world. It's,
Hmm.
yeah. I mean, I think early intervention services are just so important. Um, and I think we're catching on now. More and more people are using them, which is why
Hmm.
there's such a long wait for certain things now. Um, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done.
Absolutely. And I think it's less taboo. Like, um, for people are more vocal about, yeah, my child receives speech or my child receives this or they graduated through that. Whereas I feel like, 10, 15, 20 years ago, people didn't talk about that. Like, don't give my child a label.
Hmm.
Mhm.
I'm not sure if you faced that, like either one of you. The fear of labeling your child, was that like something that bothered you?
I would say, yeah, it can be a little like scary to maybe let people know that just because
Hmm.
I don't want them to seem less than their peers. Like if there's a physical, we're at the playground or something like that, and they can't climb up something when there's a kid who seems their age, can do that. Just being able to keep up with their peers and being able to make friends. I mean, I don't know if someone whose child, didn't need services and is developing on track, how they would feel about having a friend who's maybe a little bit behind and can't keep up. I'm sure that might, especially as a child, be a little confusing, like, oh, well, I can do this, why can't my friend kind of thing.
Hmm.
So that can be a little scary, like trying to make friends and making sure my children don't get frustrated with maybe not being able to keep up or do certain things that the friends are doing.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I think as a mom, like I'm always concerned about, social interactions with my kids. If a child's rude to them, or I'm really big on teaching my kids, like, we're going to treat people kindly and do this, but not everyone's children have that same experience, or children aren't perfect. They're going to make mistakes. And I think I can relate because I understand, like, you want to make sure that your children aren't hurting or,
Hmm.
um, you know, and I imagine that'd be very hard. Like, I don't want my kid to feel like they are less than or they're not having positive social experiences because I chose to tell someone that they are dealing with this. Um, so that makes sense.
Hmm.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. And for us, I mean, my personal, um, personally, I mean, we haven't really felt that it was any particular way. I mean, it's pretty clear now that there is something different about Grayson. Back 5, 6 years ago, you really couldn't tell. But the older that he's getting, the more you are starting to tell. I mean, I think maybe it's just becoming more apparent when you see him, um, that he definitely has some sort of disability. So I don't think that they're, you know, it doesn't really make a difference to us whether we label him or not. I think just having him labeled per se just kind of benefits other people, not really him, so that other people know kind of what to expect or what they're really working with. And it honestly, it helps out in public too. It doesn't, we don't get as many dirty looks if like people see that like, he's traveling with like 6 or 7 people and, they're all carrying bags full of like sensory toys and, X, Y, and Z. Like it doesn't do any damage. It really, it kind of helps. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can see there, different scenarios and how one might feel like it is helpful versus another situation. So talking about the, how you got started and what your first steps were with getting your children evaluated, Rebecca. I know there's so many things to do, so I guess the sequence can really vary a little bit from situation to situation. What was kind of your first step with getting your children evaluated?
Well, calling early intervention, setting up a time for them to come out and do an assessment. I think they usually block off 2 to 3 hours, but it just depends on, how the child is doing that day. And just looking at all different aspects of their life, speech, movement, fine motor, obviously depending on the age, feeding stuff. So both boys were around the same-ish age, I would say like between 10 and 13 months when they got evaluated. And both the evaluations went, maybe an hour, like they didn't take as long as, they allotted. And just having somebody sit down with you and kind of discuss what qualifies them, what doesn't qualify them. And the nice thing with early intervention, if you qualify, you qualify for physical therapy, but not quite for speech, because you qualify for physical therapy, you can receive speech services, even if you didn't score that way necessarily. So for my youngest, they weren't quite sure if he really needed any speech intervention. But because his older brother had gone that route, I kind of was like, no, I would like for him to receive that, just because I see very similar developmental steps with the two of them. So they very much listen to the parents, and kind of, if you need to be your own advocate, you can be. But I never really was in a position where I felt like they weren't listening to me or weren't taking my concerns seriously or anything like that. So it was nice to feel heard and have a professional kind of validate my concerns.
Yeah, that's really great. I feel like my experience in the school age situation with getting approved for services, it seems a lot different where if they don't score significantly, delayed enough, there's no question they're not providing those services. So I love that approach with early intervention. It's actually more aligned with like my ABA background of kind of over supporting, and then until you realize, okay, I can fade the support. And I think that's great for early intervention, because how much of a mistake would it be if a child needed speech and you decided, we're not really sure, so we're gonna not give it.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of want to err on the side of caution when it comes to early intervention. So that's really great. I actually can't speak for Maryland early intervention services if they have that same approach, but I love to hear that PA is doing that.
I don't want to backtrack, but I will say my experience with the 3 to 5 year program has been a little bit different. We're still very new to it, so I'm still getting the hang of understanding it. Now the qualifications are different because it needs to be shown that the lack of what they are lacking is going to impair their learning ability. So my oldest was receiving physical therapy and speech through the birth to 3-year program. When he aged out at 3, he still qualified for speech, but did not have enough of a deficit for physical therapy to receive services. So he still needs help in that area. So we're now having to seek outpatient services, which that's been fun. I'm sure we'll get into that at some point. So there's been some frustration there that he clearly, physically, you can see he still has some catching up to do. Yes, he can run with his peers and keep up. But I guess in their eyes, it wasn't enough to impair his learning, which I understand there has to be a cutoff somewhere, but just as a parent, it can be a little frustrating.
Yeah, that medical versus academic conversation. And sometimes I feel like it's really subjective because you could say, well, in this scenario, this could impact them, and they're focusing on, other scenarios. So that conversation is always hard, and I think it's always confusing for families and even for experienced professionals. Like, is this really impacting them academically or not? So yeah, you're kind of getting into that, dabbling into that a little bit more resistance towards the services, which um, definitely armor up. I know you have Kate there that's kind of navigated a lot of it, and um, being an advocate and being putting on your mama bear when you need to, I think is really something that you have to do in some of these scenarios.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the whole battle between academic and medically necessary, that's just the beginning. You're going to encounter that frequently and probably for the rest of both of their lives. And it's really frustrating. Clearly Grayson is very, very impaired and we still fight.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
So yeah, it's really unfortunate that it comes down to it, but you got to do what you got to do, and you have to get mean when you have to get mean. So
Yeah, absolutely. It's a little disheartening, but I think there are a lot of really great parents that have walked through it that are so eager to help others that are going through it. So I know we've only kind of dabbled into the early intervention part, and your children are very young, so they're really in that phase. But other than the medical versus academic, which I imagine would feel kind of confusing, because it still is confusing to me at times, how you can really separate the two in many scenarios. But have you kind of experienced other things that kind of felt conflicting or confusing?
So more of the conflicting information in the medical setting, just with looking at the myofunctional therapy, trying to get my son into that, but them not starting it until the age of 5. I am sure there's reason behind it. Maybe it's being able to follow directions or something like that. They did refer us to an OT, which maybe there is crossover there. So we're just kind of back at square one, waiting for an appointment with an airway specialist to kind of see where we're going to go from there. But it kind of full circle that there's medical things that are impacting developmental. So in his instance, it could be the tongue tie that is restricting movement in his mouth, which is impacting his speech, which is a little upsetting that we're just realizing now at the age of 3 that if we had known that maybe a year ago would have been beneficial. But hindsight's 2020. All you can do is kind of move forward with the information that you have now, and kind of be your own researcher in a way. Look up any possible links. I'm sure there's a medical professional out there who will listen to you, and just keep doing your own research. It's unfortunate that that's kind of how it has to be, but more information that you're able to gather, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah. And you were sharing that your pediatrician really advocated for that initial infants and toddlers evaluation and services. But have you, I'm guessing by your statement, have you encountered medical professionals that kind of like dismissed your concerns? Um,
Um, maybe not so much dismiss. I mean, and going back to the whole mouth therapy, tongue tie, we had been seeing another dentist who never mentioned a tongue tie or anything like that, which I get, as a 2-year-old, 2.5-year-old, it's hard to get a good look in the mouth. But it would have been nice to maybe be a little aware of that a year ago, where we could have been on a wait list, way back when, to see this specific dentist who can potentially fix that. So I guess it's more so just making sure the professionals you're seeing are looking for what they're supposed to be looking for. I mean, I'd heard about tongue ties, all that kind of stuff before, but I never really knew what to look like what to look for or what it could possibly look like. And even a year ago, how that really could impact so many different areas, feeding, speech, all of that stuff. So really, I've been in the last year or so more looking into things on my own, kind of seeing what other options are out there than just accepting, well, we just have to continue this therapy and see if it works. Because we could do speech therapy all day long, but if that tongue doesn't have movement, those sounds aren't going to come out the way that they're supposed to. So, I mean, do your own research, keep pushing forward, pushing for answers, and be your own advocate.
so it kind of, just hearing your story, it kind of makes me also think be willing to get a second opinion. Would you say that that's worth it?
Oh yeah. I mean, for us in the realm of the dentist, we just left because we wanted to move to one practice. And honestly, I'm glad that I did, because maybe this tongue tie would have gone, unnoticed for a little bit, which, I mean, my understanding is some speech therapists have knowledge of that. We had only started specific speech therapy, I think, in March of this year. So we didn't have a ton of sessions before he aged out of the birth to 3 year. And now we're on a wait list at the IU to get into speech. So I'm glad that we made that switch, whether it was, it's not that we weren't getting the answers we wanted. But I think just look up anything that you think could be the cause of something and explore that a little bit more, because you might be leading somewhere that's going to help you in the long run.
Yeah. And what you said kind of resonates with some of my experiences, not even just with my kids, but from hearing other stories, because I hear a ton of stories just in the roles that I play in my work life. But the topic of tongue ties in itself, I feel like that's becoming more discussed as of recent. And I feel like maybe 10 years ago, that wasn't really something that was discussed. And I've noticed with my own providers for my children that some are like, no, they're fine. And others are like, no, they're not. So I see that as well. And I imagine that's probably the case in many, many scenarios. So,
yeah.
I think if I were ever in that situation where my child needed, early intervention, or I'm sure I'm going to come across something medical at some point, to think second opinion is something that I would definitely consider after hearing your story.
Well, and also just to not just accept things that, well, this is how they are, this is how it's going to be. The whole airway specialist came about. My son has been a mouth breather for, I don't even know how long at this point. And I've been looking up kind of what mouth breathing in the long term can do for kids, just quality of life, physical appearance, all that stuff. So we'd gone to an ENT who wasn't the most helpful, but put us in the direction of a neurologist, which I was kind of like, well, why are we seeing a neurologist for mouth breathing? Like, it didn't make sense to me. Long story short, he suspected it was low tone in the mouth, which is why the mouth was hanging open. So we actually finally, after 3 months, were able to see a neurologist who diagnosed him with hypotonia, which is just low muscle tone. So after 3 years, having like an official diagnosis of that is a little reassuring. I mean, obviously, I don't think anyone really wants a diagnosis of something. But I wasn't willing to accept that, oh, well, he's just a mouth breather. It's the way he is. So just pushing and keeping, if you're not getting an answer in one area, maybe explore something else. And there will be somebody who will listen to your concerns and will be able to help you or point you in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's always good fits and bad fits. Just kind of like when you think about like a therapist, it's not always the best fit. And I think it probably can be the same for any type of provider. Um, so you were sharing that you're kind of, now correct me if I'm wrong, you're kind of waiting still for that myofunctional therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. I laugh just because keeping everything straight can be a nightmare. Yes and no. Right now, it's just waiting for our appointment that we've been on a wait list for like 6 months to see this airway specialist who it seems like would be open to releasing some of that tongue tie. And then the hopes is that a speech therapist will be able to work the muscles there to get those sounds coming out correctly. So it's just a waiting game, honestly, at this point.
So you're kind of looking for like the perfect fit of the airway specialist and speech therapist.
Yeah, just to see what combo there is going to help get. And it's not his lack of vocabulary, it's the clarity that a lot of strangers don't understand what he's saying. So I'm hoping this wait will be worth it, that we'll kind of get where we need to be going and really get the ball moving.
Yeah, the wait lists. What else? Are you waiting for any other services, or are those the things that are?
So the IU, we're still on a wait list for speech therapy. They just don't have anyone available at the moment. They assigned us someone temporarily to work with him over the summer, because that's another thing with the IU I didn't realize, is that they loosely work on a school calendar, sort of. There is an option that you get services over breaks. My understanding is that's for kids who like really, really need it. And I didn't feel comfortable pushing for that for Hudson, just because I didn't want to take that service away from a child who maybe isn't speaking at all and could really use that help. So we're waiting for a confirmed speech therapist from the IU. And then we are seeking evaluations to receive outpatient services for OT and PT. And I figured while we were at it, let's just do an eval for speech from an outpatient service just to see what they would say. So we're on wait lists with 2 different companies just because the wait list is so long with the most known one in the area. And I just became aware of another company that's relatively new. And they have a little bit of a shorter wait list, but it's just waiting for like insurance to approve the evals and all of that stuff. So yeah, just the waiting game. So
what are the wait lists looking like for, I know you're saying 6 months for myofunctional. What are those? Speech therapy?
So the one company I just became aware of, they only do speech and OT. I think they're only maybe a few weeks to a few months out. So I'm a little more optimistic there.
Still a big range.
Yeah. The other company that is very well known around here just for an OT evaluation. Now I called, I think in May, just for an evaluation. We couldn't be seen until November. And then I think he has 2 evals for speech and PT, I think in August. But those are just for the evals. So I don't even know after that point when services could be, given. So I think that's just an overall systematic issue that there's not enough therapists out there to provide services, which is really disheartening for the kids who may be falling behind as they are waiting. And it, again, it's kind of the ball's in the court of the parent or the caregiver to find resources to supplement in that time that you're waiting to work with a professional. And it's exhausting.
Yeah. I can't imagine having to go through that. And then the one thing that I've experienced on my end is, with ABA therapy, families, they think, okay, let me just get started with this company or this situation, and then I'll switch over to here for whatever reason it might be. And then that causes an issue. And that transition, it could be like 6 weeks to, plus, depending upon how quick someone can staff. And again, you have to make sure that the person that's working with your child is a good fit for you and your family. Because I always tell people, like, prioritize quality over everything. I'm sure that people probably feel, I just need help. I need help now. And that's probably so true. But I would rather see someone wait a little bit longer and get quality over just like filling that spot.
Yeah.
But you're right, it's hard because there really isn't enough providers out there.
And it's not just this service though, too, because I had to schedule an MRI for Grayson, and it's more of like not an emergency, but it's more of an urgent matter why we're having another MRI done. And they couldn't even schedule us until October.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, this is like our neurologist is telling us we need to have the MRI done ASAP, and they can't get us in until October. So I feel like it's a lot of medical things that are going on right now. I don't know if it's just there are people utilizing the service or utilizing the procedures or whatever, but I feel like it's across the board that this is like everywhere, that there's just like shortages.
That's so tough because I know, like, when I look at children and I speak to families, and just being someone that does care about the well-being of children and, how they're doing, how they're developing medically, I'm not a medical professional, but to me, your provider's telling you it's urgent. And I have that same sense of urgency with the kids that I work with. And I think a lot of people do as well, but it's like, what do you do when your hands are tied? Maybe you could go and see if there's another, place you can get an MRI out of state, but then you're packing your bags and calling every office you can think of, and who knows where you're going.
And then you have the insurances that won't pay for out of state stuff too. So it's like everywhere you turn, it's one roadblock after another.
Have you experienced, that in itself is a barrier. But have you experienced, Rebecca, like insurance barriers yourself with your children?
Not yet. I'm curious if we will, just because we're waiting for evaluations from 2 different companies. Not that we're going to get evals from both of them, but I don't know I haven't checked to see if insurance has been run at both companies, and if that's come back that, oh, well, you've already run it with one company. So that's the one thing I make my husband take care of, especially the insurance is in his name. He understands insurance a lot better than I do. I handle all the other stuff. He can handle the insurance. I mean, I'm sure it's only a matter of time. I mean, there are the things that, like, when we're seeing this airway specialist, that's all out of pocket. Insurance won't cover any of that. So far we haven't had any like denials for stuff that, would be covered, but I'm sure it's only a matter of time that we start to see those roadblocks.
Yeah, insurance is tricky because I didn't know this until I started learning more. And the more I learned, the more I realized I don't know anything. I mean, you can have one insurance type and then there's multiple different types under that one insurance type and they're all different.
Mhm.
You can't do this thing with this insurance, but you can do it with this one, but it's overwhelming.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that they can change on the drop of a dime
Yep.
with very little to no notice. So that can be challenging. So I'm imagining, well, actually, no, I'm not imagining because you said it with your own mouth and voice, that it's a lot keeping track of everything. So how do you keep track and keep yourself organized?
I keep a note in my phone. So like with the one company that I've been going a little back and forth with, I've just been keeping a note of updates. Like I called on this date. This is what they said. I mean, the note, honestly, that's what drives me is keeping track there. And just in terms of with what we're doing and working with our therapist for early intervention, we have a whiteboard in our kitchen that's broken up by each child, each area that they're receiving services, and what we're supposed to be working on. Because once my youngest got into it, I couldn't keep track of everything that we were supposed to be working on. So that, and I'm very much like I need to see it visually. I just can't keep everything in my head with tabs open. But staying organized, you kind of have to. I don't really think there's an option not to. And I think it only matters to those parents who really want to get the help. I've actually heard from a couple of our therapists, like they love that I have this whiteboard because so many parents don't even open up the session notes as to like what they're working on. And that was, I mean, kind of shocking to me that there's parents who it's almost as if they just go to the sessions because they kind of have to in a way. So I think it really matters if you're somebody who really cares about your child's development. If you're an organized person or not, you're going to figure out a way that it makes sense to you to keep everything in line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely can relate to your therapist sharing that. Like it feels good to know that you're actually taking things seriously and, carrying it over. I think as as time's passed, understanding grief more. I try to have a little bit of compassion for families that do struggle in that way, where they kind of just are like, you do it. I try to assume that they're just in that place where they don't think they're capable. And then
Mm-hmm.
I try to show them like you are, and you're probably the biggest player in this situation. But yes, it's very frustrating as a provider when families aren't under, doing their best to understand, what your purpose is with the therapies and the treatments and carrying it over. But I think it's you have to have compassion because you never really know what a person's facing. But I think it's so good that you are on top of it. And I think that because of that, your children are going to progress that much more.
Mm-hmm. I think you bring up a good point of sympathizing with the parents who, I mean, it is exhausting to try to keep track of it. And as a therapist, this is what you do. It's kind of like second nature to you. So it's work, but it comes a little bit more naturally.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a lot to make sure you're feeling like you're working with them and doing everything. And, a lot of parents, they are also working parents. So they're
Mm-hmm.
having to do that while also keeping their child's development in mind. I mean, I'm lucky enough that I get to stay home with my kids. And honestly, it's to the point now that if I had to work, I would, but I don't know how I would be able to keep everything moving here in that aspect while also working. So I do sympathize with the parents who have to do it all and are just tired.
Right.
It's a lot.
It's not easy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I can't imagine, trying to navigate all that and then still having to work, and everyone's situation's so different. But I will say on the flip side, as a provider, like if you don't see your providers including you into the treatment, that's a red flag. Like you need to feel comfortable as mom or dad with whatever this provider's doing with your child and understand it and feel that it's meaningful. So, I've seen that as well, where providers have stonewalled parents, like, this is me, I'm doing my thing, and we're going to compartmentalize. And sometimes that's okay in certain areas. I've seen situations where mom and dad we want to address a certain skill, behavior. And I'll say, let me figure it out first because I don't really know what I'm doing. And then once I figure it out, I want you to be involved. So like that makes sense. But if you're not involved and you're kind of like, the door's closed, I don't go into session or I don't know anything, that would be something I would definitely look into and try to problem solve for.
Yeah.
So you were sharing that, like there's a weight with, the idea of, wow, I probably couldn't work and navigate all this. And I'm imagining that there's a lot of like emotional toll that this whole process has put on you. How do you feel that this process of learning that your children kind of need some help and are maybe developmentally behind, how has that impacted you? Has it had an impact on your relationships, your marriage?
Kind of, it's impacted everything. In terms of working, now I stopped working before Hudson was even receiving services. And I even talk with Sawyer's therapist that it's to the point that I don't think I could work, especially once, if Hudson is going to be receiving outpatient services, that could be 2 to 3 therapies potentially a week. And Sawyer's right now receiving 2 therapies a week. We're going to be adding in another one. So just between driving around with 2 of them, unless like I entrusted that in a family member, which that would be a very big ask. I just mentally, I also don't think I could handle doing all of that while working at the same time. And with that same notion, going to therapies multiple times a week, still finding that balance of letting my kids be kids and trying to make friends their age, but also we're having to plan around our therapy sessions. And that's been a little tricky, just, with availability of friends. We have therapies almost, potentially it's going to be every day, depending on, what Hudson ends up getting outpatient. So that's been a little like upsetting in a way that I'm wanting them to still be kids and have that time, but they also need these therapies to help them develop further. And just kind of that I don't have any friends, and other than Caitlin, any family who has gone through the process. So some people just see it as, oh, you're getting therapy, you're getting help, like, cool, which it is great. I'm so grateful that that is there, but kind of just how like burnt out and exhausting it can be at the same time. Just feeling like constantly needing to be working on something with them instead of just being able to kind of live in the moment. So I try to keep that perspective, but I'm very much, oh, well, if we're not working on this thing, they're going to fall behind even more. When I have friends with kids who they don't have to think that way. Right. Not to say that they're not working with them to help them develop in other aspects, but maybe it's just a little bit more pressure on this end to be making sure that we're doing what we need to be doing. And I'm not saying that, we don't go out and do things as a family. We do that. But it's a lot. And I think I've said it, burnt out. I'm 2-3 years into this with Hudson, and I don't know how much longer it'll go on, if it'll be a forever thing. I just kind of the unknown of how long it's going to continue. If he will be receiving services past 5, like It's just kind of the unknown is a little daunting in that aspect.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I'm not sure if that's how you feel, Kate, like, but the unknown is, I hate it. My least favorite thing ever.
I do, but I don't. Every day is kind of unknown for me, so I kind of just go with it. Um, but yeah, I definitely feel the whole burnout thing because not only am I still working, I do have a job, but I basically run the house and I am the primary caregiver for both kids. And it is a lot. I go and I am actively involved in Grayson's ABA therapy that happens at home every day. And they are with us 13 and a half hours a day. And I transport the kids to and from their appointments, their therapies, camps, all of that. Appointments, you name it. I mean, I'm driving to and from Philly, and I basically will work when I can work. If it's 10 o'clock at night, it's 10 o'clock at night. Luckily, I have a job that allows me to be flexible, and I'm very, very grateful that they've kind of let me do my own thing so that I can continue to work. But yeah, I mean, the burnout is real. And the summer is always the worst part for me because having both of them home just adds a little bit more of that exhaustion to it. So I am definitely feeling it, being here in the second month of summer for them. So yeah, it is exhausting though.
Do your kids do, or I'm guessing Rosalind doesn't, but does Grayson do ESY or extended school year?
Yeah, so Grayson will start ESY next week, and it's Monday through Thursday for the next 3 weeks. He'll get on a bus around 7:30 a.m. and be home by 11:15.
Now,
So
is that a different school or classroom, or is it his same group
it's
of
a
people?
different school and a different classroom, but his teacher is the same.
Okay, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
That's always the hard part with ESY that I know families that I work with, it bothers them that this is great, but this is a whole new transition and these
Yeah.
people don't know him and some opt out of it because they're like, it's just not worth it.
This is the first year we are doing it.
Okay.
I think since our first year in this school district. So probably the first time in 4 years.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I hope it goes well.
Me too.
It's probably again, another like emotional burden of, okay, how's this gonna go? It's like,
Yeah.
so you would think that I would actually think about that part, but like I don't think about it because I don't live your lives. And I always say this, I'm always relating and trying to understand your stories, but I think about the driving around for my kids. So my kids are homeschooled and we do a lot of like, I am constantly organizing and trying to figure out like how to keep them engaged and socializing and so forth. But my kids do sports, and I always tell my husband like we're going to limit to one sport per kid. And I see families that kids are in like a bajillion sports, and I'm like, I don't know how you do it. And I'm thinking, wow, you guys are living that life, but with also the emotional toll of, okay, I'm taking them to their appointments. Is this actually working? Is it actually helping? Am I actually doing the right things? Whereas in my world, it's more like, okay, I got them there. Okay, we're here. They're having
Mm-hmm.
fun. We're good. And it's not that extra layer of like worry.
Yeah.
That I didn't really click until like you just shared that. And I'm like, wow, that's different. That's
Yeah.
heavier than just going to 5 different sports per kid.
Yeah. And when you have a kid that is medically complex too, it just adds so much more to it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I'm over here still worrying about his MRI. Like, come on, who can get an
Yeah.
MRI?
Yeah. We will see. We'll see. I don't, we see the neurologist at the end of this month. So if she can pull any strings to push it up,
Yeah.
that would be great. But Yeah.
Yeah, that's conflicting. Hurry up, get his MRI. Well,
Yes.
for what? Again, the waiting game,
Yep.
which
Yep.
is, I think, the story of your lives, I'm assuming.
Absolutely.
So, Rebecca, if you were to give advice to another parent kind of just starting this journey, what would your advice be?
Just start. That I think is the hardest, is accepting, okay, you know what? Something's not right. I need to either talk to my doctor about it or pediatrician, or actually you don't even need a pediatrician to recommend early intervention. As a parent, you can just call and ask for an evaluation. I think kind of accepting that just an evaluation would be good is probably the hardest part. In my circumstance, especially with my second, it was a little bit harder to accept because I felt like, okay, I've already gone through this. I should know what I'm doing, but each kid is different. What worked for my first one may not work for my second one. And just a different therapist perspective too. If they're not working with the same physical therapist, speech therapist, they might have some things that would work for your child a little bit better. I think my overall advice, or just optimistic words, would be that it does get better. When you start to see those little victories, new words, new sounds, they're starting to crawl, they're starting to walk, like that's what makes it feel like it's all worth it, because it can feel like a very long time until that happens. Sawyer's 17 months old and we're getting so close to walking, but he's not quite there yet. Like I know it's going to happen, but it's those small victories is what will make it worth it, and will make you feel like, okay, I'm doing what needs to be done and what's going to help my child.
So you've seen the benefits with your own eyes for your two children.
Oh yeah.
Of the early intervention services.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Great. Yeah, that's, I think, encouraging, for sure.
So if you're on a wait list right now, just realize that you're not alone and your concerns are valid. You shouldn't have to become a full-time care coordinator just to get your child an evaluation. Thank you, Becca, for joining us today. We really appreciate your insights and you sharing your story with us, and a little bit about what you've been experiencing.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for joining us. Please like and follow us on Facebook and subscribe to our podcast. We can be found on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and Amazon.
Join us next time as we discuss parent mental health, emotional regulation for parents, recognizing your own personal burnout, and why you can't pour from an empty cup.
Thanks for listening. See you next time. Bye.
Bye. You can say bye.
Oh, bye.
Sip and stim. Sip and stim.